Okay, so our next speaker is Marina Muilwijk. She is a software developer at the Utrecht University. And so just before lunch, she has a kind of intriguing title. So she's going to open the black box for us. So I'm really curious of what this is going to be. So yeah, Marina.
Yes. So I deliberately kept my title really vague. Okay, this is the black box that I'm talking about. This is the university library. We have two buildings. We have a black building and a white building. So this is obviously the black one. And as you see, this is completely closed. But inside there's a revolution going on. In fact, there's two revolutions. One starting from the peasants and one starting from, well, I think middle class would be a nice name. Okay, first a little bit of history, because as we all know, revolutions start because something is wrong. And here you see on the left the thing that is or was wrong. These are two systems, and never mind which systems, and they can talk to each other because they're on the same server, and they can see each other's files, and they can see each other's databases, and it all works nicely together. And then we ran into trouble because at some point all of our systems didn't fit on one server, so we had to move them to separate servers. And while you can still, of course, make all sorts of links, but then we thought maybe this is the time to start using web services and APIs to let these systems talk to each other. And as you can see, this highly technical drawing, this is actually how developers actually make their drawings when they're not doing PowerPoint. Okay, so these are the systems, the new way of systems. And one of the things we did was, for instance, there's a system that can talk from our digitization process to our repository. There's a system that can then send files from our repository to another server where they can be changed and modified and turned into JPEG or whatever you want to do. And there's another system for metadata, so we can change everything. This is an instance of one of our APIs. This is a really boring one. This is the one from our digitization service to, well, whoever wants to use it. Well, you can see all the simple things. There's a title, there's an author, there's way at the bottom there's an Aleph ID, which of course can be linked to our catalog. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about the URL, the way it was built up. Well, there's the domain, which is simply well, Utrecht Web Services. And the 2 is just a shortcut for us to know which server we're talking to, development or whatever. Then there's the digitization workflow, which is the name of the API that we're using. There's workflow service, which is the part of the API we're using, because some of them consist of several parts. Then there's the method we want to use, in this case metadata, which means get me metadata about the number that you see at the back. Now, this is a really simple one that we made. And then it all ends up with this. And this is our first, we're going now to start for the revolution. This is how we first presented our stuff to our users. You can still, it still works. This is a map of the river near Vlaardingen, near Rotterdam. And I'm not sure if you can see it from the back, but there's this thing, document in Google Earth. And that is because one of our curators was teaching a class on maps, in this case maps of rivers. And he had this idea that it would be really nice to georeference them and show them in Google Earth. So he came to us and said, how can we do this? Well, we said, well, we have a sort of API which tells you a little bit about the digitized map. Well, you can see it here. It's, again, of course, title, author. And in the back you can see below something about DSpace asset store, which is our way of telling people where it is. Well, of course, it's useless if you just read this as a normal person. But one thing we did was to give this information to someone who worked with us so that he could pull up the files on the basis of this and then give them to the georeferencer. We use this one. Well, I think some of you know how georeferencing works. So this is our nice map, and this is our map on Google Earth. Now what we noticed during this project was that although some of the data that we needed was in our repository, some of the other data was in our catalog, and the two don't really talk to each other. And besides the catalog, this Aleph in our case, well, it does have an API, but it's not open to the world. So we had the problem that we had to copy some things out by hand and put them in an Excel sheet and convert them and do all sorts of really horrible things. And that's when we learned, well, okay, if you want to make an API, it's not unlike what Steve said, then you must think about first, what should it do? And then think about, okay, so what system should the data come from? Rather than the other way around, which is how we started. We have system A and these are the data you can get from it. And this is what led to this brilliant app. This is talking to our circulation system. And it's also, well, you can't really see it, but of course you have to be logged in because you can only see your own loans. This is all it does. It shows you what's currently on loan, and if you have any requests, it will show you whether they're ready to be picked up or not. And the thing with this is that this was built by an external app developer, because we don't make our own apps. And we didn't want to give him direct access as a username password to our circulation system. So then we came up with a layer between the two. So he talks to the layer and the API, which uses our own hacked up version of OAuth, so we still have to change it to proper OAuth. He talks to the API. The API says, okay, yes, I recognize this app. And okay, the first time the user has to log in, and then he remembers you. So it's logged to your phone. So he knows, okay, this is this app on this phone. Okay, now I know which user you are. Now I can show you what loans you have. Well, this went all really very nice, and we were all very happy. This was the revolution from the peasant point of view. This is still something that's internal. Management doesn't care how we do it. As long as we deliver apps like this, they're fine. It's all very good. There's another revolution going on. And I start with, again, the old bad ways. This is the advanced search of our catalog. An advanced search, as you may or may not know, it's the kind of thing where you put in everything. So you can see you can search fields, you can use Boolean operators, and you can say, well, the woorden naast elkaar means, do these words have to be exactly adjacent to each other or not? And then there's all sorts of filters, and it's really, really complicated. And you really have to take classes to know how to use this system. And this is how this kind of thing is built. And one day a librarian wakes up, he has a really brilliant idea. We have to make a website, and it has to have feature A. This is really important. And he talks to a couple of colleagues, and finally this is what they take to the developers. Developers, please make something that has feature A through N. Developers do as they're told, and make a system like you just saw. And then we put in Google Analytics, and these are actual usage numbers. There are actually 4 users per day for one of our sites. So something went horribly wrong there. So that's when we thought, oh, maybe we should start doing things a different way. And then one day I read in a newspaper about this book. This was in a column, and somebody mentioned the book, and I mentioned it next day at coffee, and so I thought, well, it's this book. And what this claims, it's written for companies, but it claims that also work for other organizations. And it says, okay, we're going to do this the scientific way. You want to develop a product, we're going to do this the scientific way. You start with a hypothesis, you think of experiment to test it, you measure it, and then you know whether your hypothesis was right or not. So this is, they do things in cycles. So you start with building. Building doesn't really have to mean build a website, it can also mean build a paper prototype. Or go to your users and ask them, would you sign up for this service? Whatever you want to do. The main idea is you build something that can test your hypotheses. So we decided to give this a try for a system for, we have a list of all the databases and search engines that we have access to. And it's 10 years old and it was really due for an overhaul. So we built a system, and with a bit of luck we might be able to test it ourselves tomorrow, but I'll let you know if that is actually possible. So you build it, then you measure it. And that is the hard part, because how do you measure if people actually like it? Well, one thing we did is we kept the old system. There's a big button on the old system. Do you want to try our new system? And people can click on it, and then they can see if they like it. And then we can see if after that they go back to the old system or if they keep using the new system. So that might be one way to see if they like it. And we also have interviews with people. So anything works as long as it measures what you think you should measure. And then you learn from that. And that can be a hard thing. That's one thing we found with this huge list. At the moment, it's a huge list, and you can browse through it by alphabet, and you can filter a bit. Say, for instance, well, I only want bibliographies, or I only want dictionaries. And we're very proud of it, because people put so much effort in the right classification of everything. So we built something, and last week we had the results, and the user said, nah, browsing, there's only 2 databases I actually use, so what I would like is a direct link to them, and I don't care about the rest. And it makes sense, but a lot of people in the team were, no, that can't be right. We must educate the users that what they want is browsing. That's really hard. Another thing that surprised us is that, well, we had this idea of students, everyone's on their phones all the time. They want mobile. We said, no, we don't want mobile. So, you don't want a mobile version of this? No, we don't. Why not? There's 5 questions. You have to keep asking why 5 times until you get at the root problem. Well, the root problem mostly turned out to be most of these databases don't work on a phone anyway. It's pretty pointless going all the way and then end up in a screen that you can't read. So. And this means that, well, then we have to do it again and again. And in the meantime, we have to convince management that this is the way. Because another thing that, the problem with the lean startup is that when you start, you're not quite sure what your end product will be. And of course, management is now used to the idea, okay, we write out all our requirements, like the cloud you saw with all these 10 ideas. We write out requirements, and the project is a success if we have made something that meets all these requirements. And now we have to tell them, okay, we want to look at this service, we're not even sure if it will be a success. So maybe after 2 months we have to come back and tell you nobody is interested in our service. And then what do we do? That is really the hard part about this whole thing. But anyway, this is our nice revolution. And now we're back to this map again. Because the next thing we have to do is think about, okay, so if this methodology works, this lean startup, then how do we find out what we do? We can think of some uses that people might want, But how do we generate ideas? And that's not something we've solved yet. I mean, sometimes people come up, like this curator who wants to georeference these maps. And we know there's all this lovely digitized stuff that we have and all these old collections, and we have no idea what people would actually want to do with them. So if anyone has any ideas about how we could approach our users. The problem is if you ask a user, what do you want? They will say, well, okay, advanced Zoom, that's all interesting. And I want to read the book, and that's about it. That's all most people can come up with. So that's the problem with the revolution. I mean, we are at the vanguard of the revolution, and now we have to get everyone along with us. But anyway, this is now the black box, but now it's open, and we're all very curious about what our users will want to do with our stuff. Long live the revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Is there any question about the revolution and how the revolution is happening in your library, or do you have similar comments?
No revolutionaries here.
Yeah, maybe a question from me. So, I was wondering how. So you develop all these little applications. So, for you in your position, how you are aware that suddenly this needs to be done? Do you have? I was wondering what is the workflow. So someone at the library decides to do this kind of geo-reference, for example.
Yes.
And I was wondering how the idea, the initial idea, gets to you, who is responsible of developing it, and do you get also all the contextual information around this project, or yeah, what is the process in general?
Well, usually things are planned for a year in advance, so that's a nice 1-year plan. And then they're prioritized, and only then, when we know that we're going to do it, do we ask them for the context. And that can be a problem, because sometimes it turns out that what they want is a lot bigger than what they originally asked for. So that's one of the things that we recently had was with a thing for course packs, digital course packs, and it sounded easy enough, but it turned out taking about 4 times as long as we thought, because they hadn't quite thought it through yet. But yeah, it goes first up to management, and then it comes down to us. That's basically what. There's always a queue for our work.
Okay. Any other comments? No, you are all eager to go to your lunch.
Okay.
Okay, so this was the end of the morning session. I think we start back at 2 o'clock for the workshop. And the workshop should be located in principle in the same room than yesterday, so you can go back to the room where you were yesterday.